A respected black attorney, James Wallace, was dragged out of a coffee shop in broad daylight, accused of crimes he didn't commit, and dismissed as nobody. But this nobody turned out to be the last person the local police department wanted to cross. The viral video of his humiliation not only exposed Officer Randall Moore's blatant racism, but also unraveled the corruption rotting the entire department. What happened next shocked even the most cynical, unveiling secrets that would change the town forever. But let's start from the beginning. James Wallace, a tall, impeccably dressed black attorney in his late 30s, steps confidently into Millstone Cafe, a quaint coffee shop on the main street of a small southern town. His tailored navy blue suit fits him perfectly, the crisp white shirt beneath it glowing softly under the warm light of the cafe. A burgundy tie adds a touch of elegance, and his polished Oxford shoes click rhythmically on the tiled floor. His every step exudes a quiet dignity, but in a town unaccustomed to diversity, his presence causes an almost imperceptible ripple of discomfort. As James takes his place in line, he adjusts his leather briefcase, glancing casually around. The cafe's decor is inviting, with rustic wooden tables, potted plants, and framed black and white photographs of the town's history. Yet, the atmosphere feels oddly cold. Behind the counter, the barista exchanges a quick, nervous glance with a coworker. A couple seated by the window suddenly fall silent, their eyes darting toward James, before looking away. James notices the subtle shifts in energy, the hesitant smiles, the hurried footsteps, the way some customers shuffle slightly away from him. He's no stranger to such reactions. His poised demeanor doesn't falter as he focuses on the menu board overhead. After all, James Wallace didn't become a successful attorney by reacting to every slight. He's learned the art of maintaining composure. The soft chime of the bell above the door interrupts the moment. In strides Officer Randall Moore, his heavy boots thudding against the floor. Randall is a stocky man in his mid-40s, with a red, weathered face and a thick mustache. His uniform, though pressed, seems almost an extension of his overbearing presence. Randall's eyes sweep the cafe, narrowing as they land on James. "Excuse me," Randall barks, his voice cutting through the cafe like a whip. He stomps closer, hands resting on his belt, where his radio and holstered weapon gleam. "What are you doing here?" James turns toward him, his face calm but alert. "Good morning, officer," he begins politely. "I'm just here for some coffee." Randall's face twists into a sneer. "Coffee, huh? You sure you're not up to something else? This isn't your kind of place." The tension in the room becomes palpable. A murmur ripples through the small crowd of patrons, some pulling out their phones discreetly, sensing an escalation. "I don't believe I'm doing anything wrong," James replies evenly, his voice steady and clear. "But if there's a concern, I'd be happy to clarify." Randall steps closer, now inches from James, the sharp scent of coffee and sweat mixing unpleasantly. "I know your type," Randall says, his voice lowering but dripping with venom. "Coming in here, loitering, probably casing the place." Before James can respond, Randall's hand shoots out, gripping James by the arm. The attorney's jaw tightens ever so slightly, but he doesn't resist. Randall yanks him toward the door, barking, "We don't need your kind hanging around here." The cafe door swings open with force, and the two spill onto the sidewalk. A small crowd gathers quickly, phones raised and recording the unfolding scene. Randall, emboldened by the attention, raises his voice, his words echoing across the street. "Listen up, folks. This guy thinks he can come here and loiter. Not in my town." His sneering tone drips with condescension. "We don't tolerate troublemakers." James, His suit, now slightly wrinkled from the rough handling, straightens his posture. He locks eyes with Randall, his calm expression belying the intensity in his gaze. "Officer Moore," James says, his voice carrying over the murmuring crowd. "What's your badge number?" Randall's smirk widens as he scoffs. "Badge number? You're just another nobody. Why don't you move along before I take you in?" The crowd stirs uneasily, murmurs of disapproval and shock growing louder. Some begin to recognize James from local news or community events. A woman steps forward, her phone aimed directly at Randall. "Leave him alone. He hasn't done anything wrong," she shouts. Randall falters for a split second, the weight of the crowd's disapproval starting to press on him. But he doubles down, pointing a finger at James. "I run this town, and I'll decide what's wrong." James meets his gaze, unwavering. "And I'll make sure someone higher than you decides if this was legal." The atmosphere crackles with tension, and as more onlookers gather, it becomes clear to Randall that this incident won't end quietly. Unbeknownst to him, the confrontation is already circulating online, setting the stage for a reckoning that neither Randall nor the town will soon forget. As the video spreads like wildfire, the hashtags Justice for James and #Bias Exposed dominate online platforms, turning the small southern town into a national flashpoint. News outlets pick up the story, replaying the shocking footage of Randall Moore dragging James out of the cafe, sneering at him with thinly veiled contempt. Headlines decry the blatant display of racial profiling and abuse of authority. Within hours, activists, politicians, and public figures demand justice, while the public floods the town's social media pages with outrage. Meanwhile, in the quiet of his home office, James Wallace sets to work with the precision of a seasoned attorney. His laptop glows with files of past complaints against Officer Moore, revealing a disturbing pattern of unchecked misconduct and racial bias. James's connections in the civil rights community come alive as he initiates calls to state and federal agencies. He drafts formal complaints, not just against Randall, but against the police department for enabling his behavior, citing examples of prior allegations that were swept under the rug. James's team, which includes fellow attorneys and activists, mobilizes overnight. They prepare a legal strategy to launch a civil rights investigation, while social media continues to amplify the story. By morning, the weight of public pressure grows unbearable for local officials. The town's mayor schedules a press conference, the police chief issues a vague statement of concern, and Randall Moore is placed on administrative leave. But James isn't done. He leverages the momentum, reaching out to major media outlets to expose the broader problem of systemic racism within the department. His meticulous preparation and relentless advocacy ensure this will be more than a viral moment. It will spark real change. The aftermath of the incident escalates quickly. Within days, federal investigators arrive in the town, their presence a stark reminder of the severity of the situation. Journalists, emboldened by the viral footage, uncover Randall Moore's troubling history. Repeated complaints of racial profiling, excessive force, and intimidation, all buried by the department. Each revelation adds fuel to the growing outrage. James Wallace takes the lead, organizing a class action lawsuit that brings together a diverse group of victims who have suffered under Randall's abuse of power. The legal action highlights not only Randall's misconduct, but also the systemic failures of the police department to address the complaints, framing the case as a broader indictment of institutionalized racism. Protests fill the streets as community leaders and activists rally for justice. Chants of "No justice, no peace" echo through the town, amplified by local and national media coverage. Local businesses, wary of the growing backlash, publicly denounce Randall's actions and express support for the protests. Under immense pressure, the mayor announces Randall's suspension and orders an independent audit of the police force. The audit uncovers a deeply entrenched culture of bias and corruption within the department. The findings are damning. Racial disparities in arrests, ignored complaints of misconduct, and a toxic environment fostered by leadership. The fallout is swift. The police chief resigns in disgrace, followed by several senior officers implicated in the cover-ups. The town, once complacent, now faces a reckoning, driven by the collective voices of its citizens and James's unwavering pursuit of justice. Months later, Randall faces both civil and criminal charges, while James wins a landmark settlement for the plaintiffs, channeling the funds into community programs aimed at education and racial equity. The police department is overhauled with new leadership and mandatory anti-bias training. The story ends with James returning to the coffee shop, this time greeted warmly by staff who thank him for his courage. The town, now undergoing a transformation, holds its first Diversity Day, symbolizing a commitment to unity and inclusion. James, ever humble, reflects on the power of resilience and the importance of using one's voice to dismantle injustice.